Just a request for everyone who's online. If you haven't already, could you please mute your microphone, and that'll help us keep the noise to the minimum. That said, I've got a bit of construction noise going on around me, and I'll try to minimise that as much as I can during the talk. We do have a fair bit to get through today, so I think we'll hop into it. So just a reminder, if people do have a question as we're going through today, please either raise your hand next to your microphone mute button, or just type a question into the chat window and we'll try and reply to that as quickly as possible. We are recording this, so both the slides, audio, and any sort of commentary will be available afterwards. Okay, so here's the agenda for today. Just a bit of a welcome and aim section, brief check-in on where we're going with the 10-year plan sort of for Earth observation, and then a range of reports and requests across all different components of what's happening at a national level within Australia. And also within that, we're fortunate enough today to have Sebastian from Alula providing a brief presentation on what their particular company is providing. And as we've mentioned earlier, we're trying to profile new and up-and-coming groups in this space each week as well. We will run slightly over an hour, but we'll try to keep things on time as much as possible. Okay, so just quickly, for those of you that are new, and I know we have a few new people on the call, the community webinars are part of the activities in the Australian Earth Observation Community Plan, where we're trying to build a more connected and coordinated and collaborative Earth observation community in Australia. And that's helping those groups in that Venn diagram on the bottom right there understand what each other's doing and work more effectively, together, so that we can use Earth observation in government more effectively, so that industry have got access to a whole range of different Earth observation sources, and that the research can feed into all of those. So, we have a 10-year plan there with a number of priorities which we've started working on. Just a quick update on where we are with the community plan. So we do have a steering committee in place at the moment, which is overseeing the overall coordination of the 5 priorities of the plan. And then each of the 5 priorities currently has a working group, and the groups are listed below there at the moment. And then the people who are taking lead roles in those are also listed. At the moment, the stage that we're at is each of those working groups has developed a draft strategic implementation plan for the next 5 years in terms of potential activities that are required to start implementing what the plan's trying to achieve. And those plans are based on submitted proposal ideas that we put together as part of the original plan document. Over the next 2 months, what we'll be doing is putting all of those strategic implementation plans together into a revised business plan, which will have a much larger focus on obtaining the supporting funding and supporting resourcing for delivering those activities. And in those particular activities, Sylvia Michael from GeoImage is going to be helping Joe Edkins and myself to help build and deliver that plan. So by the time of our next whole of community meeting, we would hope to come back to you with a better developed and clearer business plan and also clear specifications for where we're going with funding these activities. And again, at that point, I'd just like to stop and acknowledge all of the large amount of volunteer contribution that people have put into this so far. That's just a snapshot of where we are at the moment. I did just want to highlight that our membership keeps increasing gradually each month. We do have members across all states and territories in Australia, across government, research and education, private industries and NGOs. So we're making a lot of progress there. Those are the 5 priorities. I'm not going to dwell on them today. And as I said, even though we're looking at how we implement those priorities, our big focus at the moment as a steering committee is where are we getting money from to actually support these activities over the next 5+ years. And as I said at the next meeting, we'll come back to you on that. This is just a list of activities that the steering committee is doing. The 2 in orange and green highlight our highest priority activities at the moment. Okay, I might move over to current status and engagement updates, and we'll work through a series of tasks there. For those of you that are presenting as part of this, I'll go on mute and we'll advance the slides there as well. So just in terms of the update on Australia's space agency, so obviously at the end of the budget cycle, we had the release of the review of the space industry capability, and part of that, we had an outline for how there's an initial set of monetary allocations to establishing the Australian Space Agency and getting it going. And as you can see, over the next financial year, it's $25 million, which is to set up the agency. Beyond that goes to $50 million a year and then up to $250 million a year. Over the last month, we do know that the agency has put out a call for people in positions there. The chair, Dr. Megan Clark, and then also the deputy, Anthony Murfitt, have been spending time engaging with state governments and a range of groups to look at how each of those could contribute to the space agency's activities. Hopefully we'll hear a lot more about this at the time of our next webinar, but at the moment we don't have a lot to share. I did want to highlight this particular report which came out last week, just thanks to Stephen Ward from Synbios and Edward King at CSIRO for distributing this across the community. Those of you that haven't seen it and are interested in how we're valuing Earth observation and what it's useful for, in this case, this is for the UK government. I'd strongly advise you to have a look at this particular document. The link to the PDF is given on the right there, and we'll distribute that after the meeting as well. Okay, what we'll do now is I'll just hand over to Norman Mueller. So, Norman, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Stuart.
Okay, I'll just hop onto mute now, Norman, and if you just let me know when to advance each slide.
Sure. Just a quick apology from me. We're in a very open office environment at the moment, so it's a little noisy, so please pay no attention to the background noise. So I'm Norman Mueller. I'm a Director of Product Development at Digital Earth Australia, and I'm going to give you a very quick overview of what we've been doing in DEA. If you can just advance to the next slide, please, Stuart. Thanks. So I'm just going to cover these quick things. I note that the last one, the industry engagement, is probably going to be covered by Eva, so I'm not going to spend very much time there. So if we just go to the next slide, what we've been doing is we've been having a look at the FAO land cover classification system as implemented by Richard Lucas of the University of Aberystwyth and also of the University of New South Wales, if you know him. Essentially, the nice thing about what Rich is doing is rather than coming up with a machine learning or overall one system does all land cover classification, it takes biophysical layers that we have faith in and turns that into a land cover classification instead. So we've been testing 4 areas across Australia, mostly Queensland and New South Wales, to see whether or not this particular model will work for us. The data that we've been using is the GRSRP fractional cover, water observations from space, our intertidal elevation model, the vegetation height that was produced by Peter Scarth et al., and ABARES catchment scale land use, and that bit there is mainly so that we know where the urban areas are and where the cropping areas are. The test has been really positive. It's looking like it'll be a really useful thing. So right now what we want to do is start circulating it amongst Australian users to see if this has legs and if we should take it any further. So hopefully you'll hear some more about that in the weeks to come. Next slide, please. About a couple of months ago, we were asked by the Murray-Darling Basin Authority to be able to monitor a water release, mainly down the Gwydir Valley in northwestern New South Wales. And so what we did there is we grabbed hold of Sentinel-2 data straight off, essentially off AWS from the Synergise point. We did an in-situ correction to surface reflectance, and we were able to provide data to Murray-Darling Basin Authority and to the Commonwealth Environmental Water Office as the water was moving downstream. That was deployed as a web service, and that has now become an ongoing capacity for all of Australia. So it's also accessible on National Map. So at any time you can jump on a National Map and have a look at what the latest Sentinel-2 data is and get a good feel for what's happening there. Next slide, please. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but we've been working on doing pixel composite mosaics of Australia. We've come up with a method. It's based on a high dimensional median, which basically means rather than doing independent band medians and trying to munge them together, this is a vector median which does all bands of, at the moment, Landsat at once. It picks the median of all bands. It's very similar to Medoid in implementation that you might be familiar with from Neil Flood and so on. In this case, what we produce is actually a synthetic product, but what it allows us to do is to be mathematically consistent and robust so that we can perform robust analyses beyond that. And what we've done is to produce the entire archive as annual Australia mosaics right back from 1986, although 86 is a little patchy because it wasn't the full coverage that year. It is per sensor as well, so you'll have a Landsat 5 mosaic for every year up until about 2000-ish. Then you've got the Landsat 7 ones, and then from 2003 to 2011 and so you have both of them, but as individual mosaics. So we have processed our entire archive to do that. It's also available on National Map. Next slide, please. Mangroves. So if you're not aware, we've had a great collaboration with Pete Bunting, Richard Lucas, Peter Scarth, Kate Ticehurst, Claire and Imam work with us as well to map basically the entire coast of Australia for mangroves, wherever they exist. So this is a combination of several data inputs, including the JRSRP fractional cover, the LiDAR canopy height model, and JAXA's Global Mangrove Watch data. And essentially what it's done is map mangroves over the last 30 years. This has been really, really good, especially with, for instance, the mangrove dieback in far north Queensland and the Northern Territory, and is an ongoing product that I believe is going to be released via Turn Landscapes, and we are releasing it here also as web services. Just one last, sorry, Stuart, one last thing there is that there'll be a mangrove workshop at an upcoming EOGN meeting in late August. That's roughly the 22nd, I think, at which Richard Lucas will be there as well. Okay, and just if you go to the next one and just click on that, it's a little bit of an animation there. It should just give you a quick overview of, let's see if it works.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working so far. I'll keep trying.
Never mind. Essentially what it shows is for this area around Roper River in eastern Northern Territory that the mangroves slowly grow and grow and grow, and then when you hit 2016 you get this sudden dieback event, and it's really visible how the inner surface, especially of that coastal margin there, suddenly dies off. Interestingly, having talked with Richard at length about this, it seems that the cause of this is cyclical, that it goes through a long-term tidal phase where sea surface level encourages mangroves to expand, and then a sudden change causes a dieback event, and then it goes through the cycle again. And it's been seen in some parts of Arnhem Land that this is proceeding something like on a lunar phase cycle of a 20-odd years or so. So yeah, fascinating output. So my last slide, seeing as that won't run, the industry engagement workshops. The Frontier SI are going to be coordinating an industry engagement workshop series. I'm not going to say any more than that at the moment because I believe Eva is going to be talking about that. But as far as I know, Eva or Phil are the ones to contact at Frontier SI. So I'm going to leave it there. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Great. Thanks very much, Norman. We'll talk about some of the Earth Observation for Government Network workshops a little bit later on. All right, just on to the next one. Oh, thanks, Norman. Okay. Tim Malthus, are you online at the moment?
Yes, Stuart, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. I'll hop on mute and let you get going.
Cool, thanks. Hi, everybody. So this is just an update on a collaborative project supported by Digital Earth Australia, which is with the primary aim of collecting near-surface validation data to validate the surface reflectance products produced out of DEA. So this is I presented a summary of this a couple of meetings ago. We're undertaking field data collection coordinated by us under an agreement with GA, and it involves a team, not only CSIRO team, but also folks from GA, as well as folks from the universities of Wollongong, Melbourne, Queensland, and Adelaide. We've been pretty frantic. The project got up and running pretty quickly. We've been pretty frantic getting data sets to essentially measuring surface reflectance, as shown in the photo here, at a number of sites shown on the map. And these are measurements timed to coincide with clear skies with the satellite overpasses of either Landsat 8, Sentinel 2A or Sentinel 2B. And we've been cracking on. The project's been extended until the end of the year, which is great, to the end of the calendar year, which is great. And we have developed a set of common protocols to actually acquire this data. The intention is for this and historical data to actually be managed and uploaded onto the National Spectral Database as a national resource. So this is not data that's going to be lost. The whole idea is to make this available not only to the Australian community, but to the international community. Next slide, Stuart. Thanks. So this is a summary of the data takes so far. We've had quite a coordinated effort at the CSIRO site on the Pinnacles in Western Australia. GA have been doing a fantastic job also on measurements at Lake George, just north of the ACT. And we have a number of measurements also being obtained across a number of sites in Victoria, in Queensland, and in South Australia as well as New South Wales. So we're upwards of about 36 coincident passes here. Quite a few of those are actually dual overpasses. We've been quite fortunate in coincident overpasses of Landsat with one of the Sentinels, and it's been great to take advantage of those. They pass over within about 10 minutes of each other. So certainly as we get towards the end of the year, we would hope to at least increase that by 20, if not double the number of sites we have measured. Next slide, Stuart. Thanks. Just to reiterate, I showed this slide the last time I spoke. Not only are we seeking this concurrent data that we're collecting, but we're also seeking historical spectral data with which to host in the National Spectral Database. And this is building on the spectral database work from the University of Wollongong conducted by Laurie Chisholm. So we're wanting really to just accumulate or get a list of who has what. And I sent an email out through the community, but I'm also keen for further. Some people have come back to me, which is great, and I will follow up with them. I would like to hear from others who either have in-member data, so this might be laboratory spectral measurements or leaf reflectance measurements, but also measurement over plots out in the field, particularly those coincident with satellite overpasses. So if anybody has that material, please either email me or Madavi Thankapan, so that we can actually collate that information and then ultimately get it into the spectral database. Final slide, Stuart. Just to reiterate, as part of this project, we are coming together as a team. The first time we've actually got together physically for a team, the project was up and running so quickly. And that is in a couple of weeks' time here in Brisbane. And this is really to assess the progress we've made and particularly talk about lessons learned as we were in such a rush to get this project going. We will look at at some of the calibration issues for instrumentation, some of the protocols we've developed, share the methods we've been using, and then begin to actually do a kind of site-by-site analysis of their reflectances, what we've gleaned so far, any site variances, databases, and this is really around helping us assess where we might take this work into the future. Whether we want to keep the existing sites or look at others or develop new methods and future directions. So the new methods might include the automation of some sites. It might include the acquisition of difficult to get to sites with UAVs, etc. We have some invited presentations. As part of that workshop, we're very fortunate to have Kurt Tomey from NASA Goddard coming to the meeting. He is the current chair of the CEOS WGCV and also NASA's expert in Calval. We will also have a remote presentation with Chris McClellan from the NERC spectroscopy facility on calibration issues, and Stephen Meyer has also offered to come and talk about UAVs and spectral collections over forested sites, drawing on his experience in the Northern Territory. And I'll report back on the outcomes of that workshop at the next meeting. And that's it from me, Stuart.
Great. Thanks very much, Tim. I think we'll do a sort of follow-up email to everyone just with that request there as well in terms of asking people. There's a question from Michael about any of the material from that workshop going online, Tim, afterward.
Yeah, certainly happy to share that as well as the outcomes from the workshop. Let me make a list of that and consider how we might make that data available. But I don't think the whole idea of this is to be open about this, and we're not trying to hide anything. So happy to make it available.
All right. No. Okay. Well, we'll help out with that as much as we can. Cool. All right. Thanks very much, Tim. Okay. So just moving forward. Next presentation is going to be from Eva Rodriguez on work that she and Phil Delaney are doing through Frontier SI in terms of building the linkages between Digital Earth Australia and industry in a very broad sense. So Eva, are you online?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Stuart. Yes, just a few minutes to talk you through what this consultation is all about. We launched yesterday. So, Stuart, you can go next slide. I believe you've all seen this, but this is just a quick overview of what the industry consultation is going to be about. We are trying to go very broadly, and I guess the objective is to try and expose Digital Earth Australia to industry, and as Stuart just said, industry in its broad sense. So obviously the spatial sector as a non-user of Earth observation data is there, but then we want to open to growth sectors as well. So we're looking at transport, defence, mining, data, science, health, agriculture, and others. And we're targeting every, organization when it comes to private sector. So not only the traditional SMEs that we may find on the spatial sector, but try and go broad. We're opening this as well to research and academia for the first part of the, consultation. And the workshops will probably be more targeted towards industry. The idea is that Digital Earth Australia sees the importance of opening this platform to the private sector for them to start using it and generate value for the spatial industry, but also for other sectors of the economy, and make sure that it is the technology is adopted and used within Australia. The process that we're going to follow is, as you have here highlighted, so there has been an initial industry consultation. That was just a little sample where we talked to a number of mainly spatial professionals, but also people from other sectors such as banking or the insurance sector, to understand what the current impressions are on what DEA is and the expectation of what DEA will provide. And then there's a report coming out of that consultation that was just released yesterday, and I'll provide the link to that if you haven't got that yet. There are going to be a number of workshops that will run nationally, probably around September. But before that, we are going to have a webinar series that's going to be open to everyone. So whereas the workshops are going to be targeted at industry and private sector, these webinars are going to be open to everyone. They're going to be run online. And what they're going to be is some sort of demonstration of DEA using a couple of use cases and try and guide through everyone that has interest. So a little bit a run across what DEA is and what the capabilities are. We will then release a beta trial that will be available to use for free to begin with. Just obviously that will be restricted to a number of capabilities, but just to start getting people to use the platform and to get a feel for what DEA can do. Going back to the workshops after September, we'll then wrap up and provide an industry strategy to Geoscience Australia that will set the basis on how the ongoing engagement is going to happen with industry. You have here a number of outputs that we're going to have at the end of the consultation. Next slide, please, Stuart. So the campaign launched yesterday, and you can access all the information available at the moment at frontiersi.com.au/DEA. You will see that we've published a report with the findings from that first consultation with industry leaders. There are definitely some very interesting insights there, and all the placeholders for webinars and workshops are there at the moment. They will be populated as details emerge in the coming weeks and months. I strongly encourage you, if you're interested in this initiative, to register because we will then be sending all of the updates and dates as they emerge to you all. Next slide, please. Right, so this is the report that I was talking about. It's called the DEA Industry Consultation First Impressions. You can access it at the website as well. Next slide, Stuart. And this is just a quick overview of some of the key findings that we've kind of encountered through that consultation. We were quite open in talking to our industry leaders, and we've seen that the industry overall sees a government playing a role in the data infrastructure creation, and this is because most of these projects require heavy investment, and I guess private sector expect that investment to be ongoing, which is actually a good thing when it comes to DEA, because that's actually a reality at the moment. There is a lot of work to do when it comes to current knowledge and market awareness in terms of Earth observation and the capability, or I guess the value that Earth observation can bring to an organization. One of the key issues that people are experiencing are the access to Earth observation data. So how to access it and the availability of it, it's still cumbersome, so that's something that we're hoping DEA can help with. The good sign is that DEA is already known among the target users, so the people that we talked to were aware of DEA, if not with maybe not so clear about what DEA is, and I think we have to stress here that the Digital Earth Australia program is not defined because it's work in progress, and especially this consultation is actually going and growing as we talk to industry. So very important to know that even on the webinars, we're trying to take a very agile approach whereby we're learning by doing, and we're learning from the input that we get from the private sector. So this is something that's probably maybe not the common approach that has been taken in government in the past, but we are very conscious of the fact that things are moving very quickly. There are no platforms that are coming out in the market, and we just want to make sure that whatever we create makes sense for industry and have value. In terms of insights, value-added products are seen more useful by application sectors than by spatial companies who are mostly interested in the analysis-ready data, and you have some more information of what that is in the report, and you can talk to us if you have any questions. Another big point of the consultation is going to be on clarifying how IP is going to work, especially when it comes to companies creating products and services that leverage DEA capabilities and or data. Next slide, Stuart. These are some of the barriers that we uncovered when it comes to Earth observation. So before talking about DEA, we ask the industry participants to tell us a little bit more about Earth observation and the barriers they found, because we wanted to understand whether there were some issues there before actually moving to the actual platform. And indeed there are. So a few of what I've mentioned before, access and use. People find it hard to access the data, but then not even that, they don't know how to use it. You have to be, or what we've uncovered and learned is that they think you have to be quite a specialist and quite knowledgeable in the technical side of things to be able to work with Earth observation data. A lack of professional education and market education, again, knowing what value these data sets and products can bring to an organization. And then in terms of technical, there's data suitability, data processing, and data storage. So data suitability is around the fact that not all data is standardized and not all data is fit for purpose. And I guess that's one of the big barriers that DEA is trying to remove. And it's making big steps in that direction. And when it comes to data processing, we see that sometimes companies don't have the resources in-house to do the processing of the data because of knowledge or because of, I guess, linked to the next point, storage or I guess, power. And then the other point was on governance, and that relates to different companies having different organizations having different approaches to what the role of government should be with respect to private sector in terms of data acquisition, data commercialization, and the like. Next step, please. In terms of your expectations, these are some of the key ones that we uncovered. So there is an expectation that DEA should be easy to access and use. So trying to move away from that. Earth observation is very difficult to use and access, as we're saying in the barriers. People want to see computing and processing capability as part of DEA. Another important one is the provision of same-day data, so Earth observation data that has been captured on the day. So we're talking about near real time there. As part of the exercise, there's an expectation that there will be use cases and trial access, which we are already going to be, I guess, showcasing and opening to the community in the next month. And then commercial standard SLAs. So I guess the environment at the moment has been run on the NCI, and obviously the private sector understands that for them to run or to use DEA commercially, there needs to be, I guess, standard level service agreement so that they can, I guess, provide those services with enough reliability. Stuart, please, next slide. I think that's it then on my side. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot Phil or myself an email or just send an email to dea@frontiersi.com.au.
Right. Thanks very much, Eva. So we'll now move on to Jonathan Ross from GA. Are you online, Jono?
Yeah, Stuart. Human error. I got on in the end. Hey, everyone. Just in the interest of time, just a couple of points. One is around the regional Copernicus data hub that the Australian EO community runs as part of our contribution to the Copernicus program in support of the EC. I hope you're all using it. It's a program that's co-invested in by CSIRO, the New South Wales government, the Queensland government, West Australian government, and GA. And I'm pleased to say that it has now been joined by the New Zealand government as well. So certainly the value of that is only increasing as our partners in the region start to engage with Earth observation data more fully and at scale, and start to see the need, as Eva mentioned, to really focus on using the data, not finding it, downloading it, and all that sort of stuff. It does have a new user interface called SARA, and I'd encourage everyone to get on there and try it out and provide feedback. And that project is also now looking at its next phase, what that might look like. It might look at how's the data made available on platforms other than the NCI, looking at maybe expanding the geographical area, maybe looking at additional data sets. So any feedback or input from the community on how the next phase of that project would best support local users and engagement of local users into the region, please let any of those partners know and they can feed it into the process. One other point, obviously, is that the Space Agency is now up and running from 1 July. One of their priorities is establishing overarching space partnerships with a set of priority countries, and that includes, and organizations, and that includes ESA, UK, USA, France, and Japan. So they're busily looking to get the discussion started on that. Obviously, one of the things we'll be looking for is that those partnerships create opportunities for the Australian EO industry, both upstream and downstream, and for our researchers. And the good thing, I think, is the fact that the Space Agency will be looking at overarching partnerships means there's more potential to trade things off. For example, to offer more support in space situational awareness as an exchange for more support from the other side of Earth observation. That's the kind of dynamic that having the Space Agency discuss things at that higher level brings in. So I'd encourage you to send your thoughts through to anyone at GA, BOM, or CSIRO to feed that into the agency as well. One last quick thing is next year Vietnam will be the chair of the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, and GA, BOM, and CSIRO are looking to ensure we help them make a success of that, given that they're an important partner in the region. And one of the things we're thinking might be looked at is how can we get Earth observation data architectures running that support regional collaboration on transnational issues such as sustainable development in the Mekong River. That's a challenge that has obviously technical aspects to it, but also has some political and governance aspects as well. And I think that's enough for today, Stuart. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. Thanks very much, Jono. There's just to note, there's a question from Deepak to you in the chat if you want to answer that.
Yeah, will do. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. All right. Next update from CSIRO. Hopefully we've got Alex Held online. Alex, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Cool. I'll let you give you an overview of where you guys are going with Earth observation.
Thank you very much. And apologies, we didn't have any slides this time. I'll promise to put some together for you next time. The Center for Earth Observation has been in establishment mode since 1st of January, but we officially were launched, I guess, in June, at least from a media perspective. It continues, and we have probably at the moment about 5 permanent staff, but probably another 4 or 5 CSIRO staff engaged directly into their business units. It will continue to maintain traditional roles we've had under the previous iterations of something like this, like the Center for Earth Observation Center before, or COSA, or most recently the Earth Observation Informatics Future Science Platform that Arnold Decker ran. So the center here is mostly a virtual center. It's not a physical location per se. We're spread around the country. We'll continue to work closely with GA and the Bureau on a lot of the international engagement side of things with CEOS and the Group on Earth Observation. Its role is also to maintain lines of communications amongst CSIRO science teams across the organization who work in different business units. But I guess new to this is the fact that we now also host a project that will run the NOVASAR research facility that CSIRO has invested in. For those of you who haven't heard about this, it's basically a CSIRO co-investment into a S-band SAR satellite built in the UK by SARI Satellites. And we had the opportunity to co-invest and therefore get access to 10% of the tasking of that satellite anywhere in the world, with highest priority over the Australian territory. it's going to be launched probably in the next month or two. And after a commissioning phase of about 5 to 6 months, we will open up a site with opportunity for anybody in the research community or industry, for that matter, to request imagery. It's going to be treated as a research facility, like we have other research facilities in CSRO, like the ship to Antarctica or the astronomy dishes and so forth. And therefore, we're really keen to stimulate research and Earth observation, of course, but also research into radar and S-band in this case. I guess the unique feature here is that it's going to be taskable from Australia. We can directly downlink the data into Australia. We don't have to wait for it to be collected by an overseas satellite and then for the data to slowly come back to Australia. So I would encourage everybody online to think about potential test sites, long-term research sites that you might get interested in collecting multiple scenes over time. Time series radar remote sensing is a relatively new thing, and S-band, of course, is new as well. So there might be some really interesting applications here that you might consider. So we'll keep you up to date on the launch, of course, but also post-launch, how you might engage with the NOVA-SAR project and get access to some imagery and request some imagery over your test sites.
Oh,
as Tim was mentioning, we're also co-investing quite heavily into national satellite CalVal programs from a center perspective, complementing some of the work that specific project has been doing with Digital Earth Australia that Tim mentioned. We're very keen to co-invest basically into a national program on satellite CalVal, and are keen to engage with Geoscience Australia, but also with a number of state and research organizations who might be interested in forming a larger national program around satellite CalVal. With so many different satellites up there, other than the operational satellites, there's a lot of new science research satellites going up, as you probably know. Things like the biomass mission from ESA, or JEDI from NASA that's going on a space station. It's a spaceborne LiDAR, and many others. And FLEX, fluorescence instrument satellites. There are opportunities for also being part of international validation programs for those specific science missions, which are quite interesting, I think, for many people. So again, we're quite interested in contributing to a national program around CalVal.
Thanks, Alex. There's a question from Deepak about whether NOVA-SAR is going to be able to do interferometric measurements.
My understanding is yes, but it's probably repeat pass interferometry, not on the same pass. But yes, it should be.
Okay, cool, great. Thanks, Alex.
And we're setting up a dedicated website in CSRO that will have a bit more technical details behind it. At the moment, all you see on CSIRO is just the announcement that we've made this investment, but it's not much more. But if people are interested more directly, just contact us directly, and I can send you some materials until we get the website up and going.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex. Anything else?
Just a couple other things that we're also doing in the Center for Earth Observation. We are contributing also to the DataCube development and contributing to the DEA program. In parallel to that, we're also looking at ways of making the DataCube accessible for a lot of scientific research, both internally in CSRO, but also externally, and have developed an implementation of the DataCube that runs on Amazon S3 system. The expectation is that it would allow people to join and bring their own algorithms to such a system and test it out, or use algorithms or applications that are already on it through some sort of user interface that we're still working on. The second component of that project would include also engagement of industry-specific small and medium enterprises and startup companies to see how they might benefit from this government investment. So I'd be keen to talk to Eva in your industry program to make sure that we can combine forces in understanding what the industry needs and how we can help from a platform such as this one. I thought I'd just mention also that we also have a new project coming up, just launched with Geoscience Australia, the Digital Earth Australia, in fact, and CSIRO on trying to develop the necessary workflows and processing methodologies to bring radar into the DataCube platform in a consistent way. The first lot of radar will be, of course, Sentinel-1, which already sits on the Copernicus Data Hub. We are keen to make more use of it and allow people access to a nice, consistent radar time series that they can do research with.
Right.
That's about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Right. Just noting a point from Bruce Foster, probably to Alex and also to Jonathan, about the Asian Remote Sensing Conference in Kuala Lumpur, and it would be helpful to present some of these large national initiatives there. So that's probably something to be followed up, and we would definitely do with more engagement in those areas.
Yeah, happy to get some detail on that. Yep.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Okay, just on the Earth Observation for Government Network. So this is an activity funded through Geoscience Australia, essentially for addressing those three areas that you see on the screen there, in particular taking applications developments from research and industry and making sure that it's able to be delivered in some cases by government at a national level. So just in terms of what we're doing with that at the moment, as Norman mentioned earlier, there will be a workshop in Brisbane at the end of August where the National Mangrove product that GA and Digital Earth Australia have been developing will be presented to a range of Commonwealth and state agencies to refine how it's going to be developed and delivered. Following that, we'll have a larger workshop in Canberra in September, and essentially what we'll be doing at this workshop is looking at the extent of Earth observation products which are in a research-proven state at state to continental-wide applications that could be transitioned to continental-wide product delivery through Digital Earth Australia. So this is essentially about resolving some of the overlaps between these three areas and creating a cleaner path to go from research development products like those that might sit within TERN and IMOS as National Collaborative Research Infrastructure, and then transitioning them to an operational delivery environment. And this is specifically for government applications. So this will sit in parallel with what Frontier SI is doing, but a more effective path of going from research-ready and proven products and services to ones which can be delivered through government infrastructure. So there's a database that we've developed in draft form for that, where we've gone through and looked at what products are pre-operational, but they're validated at a continental scale, but not delivered operationally. What products are research proven at state, regional or smaller levels, but not able to be produced and delivered? Which ones are research in progress? And what are some of the upcoming sensors or concepts that we need to develop applications for? So the idea is to put in place a process for regularly reviewing and identifying all of these levels of Earth observation products and then being able to transition them through to operational. And hopefully that'll get us away from the challenges that we're having of using research facilities to deliver operational products and not having things funded properly. So we'll get more updates on that soon. Collaborative research infrastructure, not much of an update on that. at the moment from my side of things in terms of what's happening with this particular area, so I won't dwell on that. There is an update from IMOS, so I don't know if Tim Maltman or Edward King are online and wanted to say a few words about this.
Yeah, I'm on the line, Stuart. Thanks, Tim here.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, so really just want to keep flying the flag for ocean remote sensing in this community. It is a blue planet. So IMOS has got a pretty good outcome from the research infrastructure investments announced in the May federal budget. So we've been extended out to 2023, and we also have some additional funding to do some new things. So we're either we're committed to or considering several new investments in the ocean remote sensing space. So I just wanted to make sure this community was aware of that. We started to invest in satellite wave data analysis this year with Mark Heemer from CSIRO and Ian Young from Uni of Melbourne. And we're now looking at making some in situ wave measurements as well. We're going to put additional investment in satellite altimetry CalVal. We already, through UTAS and CSIRO, support the only Southern Hemisphere calibration validation site for the altimeters. And we want to supplement that work with NASA and CNES to take full advantage of, well, the Sentinels initially, but also the upcoming SWAT surface water ocean topography mission is a very exciting one for oceanography, and we want to be positioning to extract maximum value out of that opportunity in about 2020. We're putting some additional investment into ocean colour radiometry. We stood up a national task team a little while ago, led by David Antoine from Curtin and Thomas Schroeder from CSIRO to review what we were doing nationally in this space and give us some recommendations about what IMOS should be doing. And we're now investing behind a number of those recommendations, and that includes probably more solid support for the Lucinda Jetty site than we've been able to provide in recent years. Having some really interesting discussions with industry partners, Shell and Rio, around instrumenting some of their commercial vessels to undertake SST measurements, particularly in Northern Australia, where we still suffer from a paucity of measurements. So that's pretty interesting. We want to keep reviewing our data processing and product delivery pipelines. We appreciate there's a lot going on in the DEA space. We want to make sure we're taking full advantage of those things. And also, one way we add value to our EO data is we map it on a daily basis through a thing called Ocean Current, which is a nice kind of simple tool that fishers and fishermen and yachtsmen and ocean swimmers and others really like. And so we want to make sure that product is improving on the back of a lot of exciting new EO data that's coming our way. So that's just a brief update for me, Stuart. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Tim. I really appreciate the effort to do this. I think we can do a lot more to look more carefully across the oceans and the terrestrial and atmospheric side of Earth observation. And I think there are some really good examples there across calibration, industry engagement, particularly your Ocean Current site that we can learn from. Likewise, there's some terrestrial learnings to the oceanography side of things. So I'm hoping we can make this a regular discussion item. So thanks again, Tim.
Thanks. I know Edward King's online. I don't know if he wanted to add anything, Edward.
Not so far, Tim. So don't know if he's on mute, but cool. Well, we'll keep going, and if Edward wants to add in, we can do that. Thanks, Tim. Cool. Okay, just switch over now to, I guess, our new sort of feature where we're trying to introduce new groups that are coming into Earth observation that are driving things forward. So I think we're fortunate enough today to have Sebastian from Alula. So Sebastian, you online?
Yeah. Hi, Stuart.
Great. I can hear you loud and clear. So I'll hand it over to you and just let me know when to advance the slides.
No worries. Well, firstly, thanks, Stuart, for inviting me to come and talk at this webinar today. I really appreciate it. I'm just here with my co-founder and business partner, Aaron Salerno. Nice to meet you all. And so basically, Alula is a marketplace for space resources, or more specifically, satellite capacity. We basically started because we realized that in orbit, there were a lot of resources that weren't being fully utilized. There was essentially a lot of waste in the space industry. In any other industry, sorry, you wouldn't have this kind of level of waste, really. You'd see shipping, every asset that is owned by a shipping company is used and stressed until its breaking point, essentially. Every ounce, every sort of dollar is monetized out of any asset that they have. But with spacecraft, it's sort of not the case all the time. People launch Earth observation spacecraft in particular a lot of the time for regional monitoring. People are doing a lot of commercial experimentation with CubeSat platforms now as well. Lots of startups are getting involved. Governments and space agencies, again, launch a lot of EO spacecraft. But what they mainly do, and this is more smaller governments, smaller organizations, not your NASAs or your JAXAs or your ESAs, but they also have regional interests. And so what Aaron and I realized is that if we aggregate a lot of these capabilities and digitize the process of accessing, so simplify the access of being able to gather data from a satellite and task satellites, you can streamline a lot of the problems that are occurring in the Earth observation industry now. And some of the other speakers have spoken about as well, in particular Frontier SI and DEA. Next slide, please, Stuart. So basically, it's a very simple idea. Two-sided marketplaces have existed for a very long time now, in a digitized way. We talk about, as we sort of talk about a lot of different things. In-space services, satellites and spacecraft, but our main focus is Earth observation. And basically, what we want to be doing essentially is become the ecosystem for people to trade the capacity on their satellites that otherwise would go underutilized. We're talking right now with a lot of SMEs, a few people in government and defense as well, who see this as an interesting tool to better gain access to important kinds of data. A lot of the time through our research, we found that there are a few platforms that simplify access to data, but there aren't many, and the information and the level of ability to access those platforms, or the awareness of the existence of those platforms is sort of lacking. And that's sort of another thing that Alula hopes to change as well over time. But again, the process is quite simple. It's sort of all about aggregating excess capacity and then aggregating the demand for the demand on the customer side in order to create useful transactions. So yeah, I don't know. Next slide, Stuart. That's fine. So basically, it's really, the business model is very simple. All we do is we simplify the customer experience by essentially creating a decentralized constellation of satellites, or a virtualized constellation of satellites. We believe that by doing this, it's more of the concept of, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to, I've forgotten the quote now. But basically, if you want to go far, you go together. I think that's it. And that's what we're doing. We're basically engaging all of these smaller commercial players in the industry at the moment, who might have a limited amount of assets in space that are of commercial value or scientific value. And we're basically saying to them, well, hey, join us and we can sort of help you grow. We can help you go farther. And we're doing this as startups as well. The startup industry was the Earth observation startup industry, the guys that launched the satellites. We've been seeing quite a lot of interest from them because they do see this as a way to sort of get more reach. And so basically, we just sort of take a fee from every transaction. So it's a very simple sort of model. And so what we're doing right now is before we go and build a lot of the technology and commit ourselves to a lot of different things, we're basically trying to manually facilitate transactions. So we're trying to, and we're working with customers now and clients now throughout Australia who want to source Earth observation data, particularly in just RGB, multispectral, a bit of SAR as well at the moment. but we're also looking into hyperspectral. You wouldn't believe how many hyperspectral satellites are sitting out there not being used, and well, not being used, but not being fully utilized, I guess. And so we're looking at taking those and sort of applying them to problems in Australia, essentially. And so, yeah, sort of next slide, please, Stuart. And so, like I said before, our aim is to build a constellation, but the constellation is a bit different because it's essentially all online. We want to be able to allow people to eventually task satellites directly through our network, and those commands get passed on through an API that we're building to the satellite operators. So this is sort of where we see the industry going in a more streamlined fashion. This allows people to easily develop applications, easily source the data they need, and that's sort of where I really sort of angling, I guess, trying to figure out how to make access to space a lot more easy. But yeah, next slide, thanks. Yeah, thank you. We're basically, you know, we're like Stuart mentioned as well. We're sort of a smaller startup. We're quite new, just under a year old. We've got great traction though so far. We just got our first sample imagery from a few suppliers, and it's quite nice. 2 meter panchromatic and I think 4 meter RGB resolution. And these are from suppliers that haven't actually had access to the Australian market before. And so what we'd like to do is basically reach out to the Earth observation community, you know, all you friendly folks, and hopefully develop relationships and see how we can help you get the data you need and hopefully make it simple and affordable. But thank you very much, Stuart.
Great. Thanks very much, Sebastian. Really appreciate your time in doing this. And you know, part of the reason for these presentations is that Earth observation, in terms of how it's collected, delivered and used, is changing so drastically at the moment, and Alula is a good example of, you know, how the access to these services is changing and expanding. So I'd strongly encourage people to have a look at the website there, and we'll probably do a follow-up email just with some more details on Alula as well. So if you do have questions for Alula, just email them to Sebastian there. So thanks again, Sebastian.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay. So there's time here for a few brief updates. I don't know if Deanna Hutchinson's online at the moment from Spatial Industry Business Association.
Hi, Stuart.
Hi, Deanna. So we've included sort of regular parts for people to just update us on industry associations and where they're going in relation to EO. So I just invite you to add a contribution there.
Thanks, Stuart. I'll talk to 4 points very briefly. One is the Spatial Excellence Awards. One is around diversity and some work that's happening there, outreach into growth sectors, and picking up on Sebastian's comments around collaboration. Well, I'll talk to it around collaboration, but it really is about thinking in a decentralised fashion about how we can grow capacity right across the entire industry. And I might start with that as a bit of a context setter and then come back to the others. One of the things that comes up a lot for our membership and, you know, private sector in general is the risk and the frustration when they've invested in developing a capability, and then it's in the market at a particular price point, and then the government, for various reasons, decides that it would be good to have that as a national infrastructure and throws, you know, millions of dollars at it. And DEA is a really good example, and I like the way the consultation's unrolling for DEA because it actually allows these concerns and a way forward to come out. You know, that all of a sudden there's tens of millions going into developing a capability that the private sector feels quite strongly they either were providing or could provide, and maybe they're not providing it at the price point that the government and other customers potentially feel that it should be provided. And so the challenge for the private sector is, well, what do we do with that? And how do we work better with government to do those things in a way that grows the overall capacity of the industry, rather than potentially kneecapping a whole handful of people in the process, which is how they feel it's happening at the moment. And DEA is not the only one. And we tend to, expect that industry associations will end up in a situation where we're adversarial and we go back and say, government, you can't do that. And that's not what we think is the right approach. What we think the right approach is to actually work together and have a better understanding about what's driving some of these decisions, what's driving the concerns on the side of the private sector, and say, well, how do we look at it from a regional point of view and say, well, what's Australia's potential capacity and what might be the ways that the various components contribute, which is back to the Earth Observation Australia plan, I guess, in many ways. So there's a discussion that's starting to emerge at the moment that looks at that with much more detail, and obviously foundation spatial data sets is one of the things that's going to come up in that says, well, what are the things that really need to be sovereign and therefore might need to be controlled by government, and what are things, what's the scale, what's the spectrum, because it's not actually a binary question. Part of that is understanding what are the things that people are applying spatial information to in terms of the questions and problems. And the Asia Pacific Spatial Excellence Awards are a vehicle for really public-private partnerships to work. A lot of the projects that go up are things that are done between government and the private sector. And what we're looking to do is to collate information out of those awards and use them to create essentially a catalogue of capability and services and a whole lot of stories and case studies that help the growth industries to understand how they might be able to use spatial information, and remote sensing and Earth Obs is certainly contribute a number of projects into that, but we also cover the other parts, so GIS and surveying and the broader industry as a whole. So the Spatial Excellence Awards are one thing, and really keen to see people's engagement and involvement in that. And we do that in partnership with the SSSI, and they also recognise individuals in the awards. So I'll give the awards a bit of a plug. If you haven't put one in but you think it might be useful, go to apsia.org or get in touch with me, and we'd love to see some entries from you, because for me it's about building the case study. The second part to that is we're working very closely with Frontier SI to do some work in the growth sectors in the outreach. And so we're using those APSIA projects as a part of explaining to the outreach industries what the capability of our sector is. And so that's really exciting, and we're enjoying that, some of the projects that are starting to emerge out of that. And you'll hear more about those over time. The last thing that I'll quickly touch on is, again, a whole of sector collaborative activity, I guess, which includes government, academia, and the private sector. But what's nice about this project is we're also working with consulting surveyors and all of the other institutes. So all of the peak body associations are also involved in this project, and it's a diversity initiative linked to the 2026 agenda. We're trying to write an action plan for improving diversity across the industry. Now, it's not just about gender diversity, which is where it started, but looking at how does diversity and inclusion across the board actually contribute to innovation and growth within our industry. So it's looking at cognitive diversity as well, which I think is one of our biggest challenges. Stuart is one of the people I know in this session, and I saw a few names on the list. I think Joe Poon, Eva's certainly heavily involved in working that through. So we're at the point of having the start of a draft report and discussion paper that will come out. So over the next couple of months, we will extend that out to much broader consultation to look at how do we attract some greater diversity into the industry, but also how do we leverage the diversity that's already here. So that's it from me.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Deanna. I mean, there's a number of really critical points, and I think just starting comments about looking at how we're building national capabilities and how that relates to business capabilities, and doing it in a sensible way where people have a voice. I think we've been long overdue in hearing, a voice across industry in that area. So that's, I'm really glad that you said that, and I would support what Deanna said about applying for those awards as well. We've got a lot of excellent work going on in private industry, government, our NGOs in this area, which sometimes hasn't made it through to those awards. So I'd strongly encourage you to nominate people working in those areas, and particularly early and mid-career people as well, in those areas. So thanks, Deanna, and look forward to submissions there. Okay, the National Earth Observation Analytics Hub. Very briefly, this is still a draft proposal in place, which we've had discussions with a number of groups across the country, and the Queensland Government will pick up discussions on that from mid-August again and have an update on where we're going by the time of the next webinar. Okay, that takes us to the end of today. Just before I go to the next meeting points, were there any critical items that people wanted to mention either verbally or in the chat window? Cool. All right. If there's not, I'd really like to thank everybody for their time today, particularly everybody who presented. I think we're starting now to get to the level of having good industry and professional group engagement, new companies contributing, hearing from where we're going at a national level. So it's really exciting, and it's great to see that we are at this point, but I think we can leverage that to do a lot more. So a couple of things. Next whole of community meeting will be on the 4th of October. You'll see a lot of communication in the meantime before that. I'd really encourage you to fill out the exit survey. There's a link that's provided there if you want to have a look at that. And the other, question from Bruce Foster about the Australian Earth Observation Conference. The preliminary planning for that is now looking at September 2020 in Brisbane. SSI's Remote Sensing and Photogrammetry Commission is collaborating with the components of Earth Observation Australia that are organising that. We have a meeting with the Convention Centre and potential underwriting groups in the middle of August. So there'll be more news on that soon, but thanks, Bruce. I think if people want to pencil in September 2020 in Brisbane for the Earth Observation Australia Conference, that would be quite helpful. Also, Adam's just reminded me the free and open source geospatial conference, which SSI is also helping out with. He's posted the website link there in the chat window. So again, thanks everybody for your time today, especially thanks to Joe for making this happen as usual. And we look forward to seeing all of you later on. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk soon.